What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back. For this camera comparison we have the highly popular iPhone 12 and the brand new GoPro 10. So throughout this video we're gonna find out which device has better image stabilization, which device has better video quality, and of course which device has a better internal microphone. And with that being said, I think we should start by checking out some sample recordings so we can see how that image stabilization works on both devices. So let's check out those samples and I'll be right back so we can talk about them. Okay, so for our first test for image stabilization, I'm using the ultra-wide lens on the back of the iPhone 12 and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. Where with the GoPro 10, I am using the super view and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. At the moment, I'm walking, as you can see for yourself, but I'm also gonna start running in a bit just so you can see how that stabilization works. On the GoPro, I have the stabilization set to the maximum level, which is called boost. So let's go running for a bit. So yeah, this is how a recording done between the iPhone 12 and the GoPro 10 would look like. Moving on to our next test. For this one I have the GoPro 10 recording in 5.3K at 30 frames per second, and I have the lens set to linear and horizon leveling. Where with the iPhone 12 I'm using the main camera and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, and here I'm gonna do a bit of running and more sudden movement so you can see which device does better for this. So let's start with this. We'll go this way, we'll go this way, we'll turn left. So yeah, this is how recording would look like under these conditions. We are moving on to our next test for image stabilization. As you can see, I am riding the bicycle. So on the iPhone, I'm recording in 4K at 30 frames per second and the main camera, or on the GoPro 10, I'm using the wide field of view and recording in 5.3K at 30 frames per second. So we'll start going. I'll try going as quick as I can, just so you can see how that stabilization works. The GoPro is set to boost. That's the maximum level of image stabilization. Oops. Okay, we'll keep going. We'll turn right somewhere around here. We'll keep going once again. And left here. So yeah, this is how the image stabilization would work on these two devices if you are riding a bicycle. For our next test, I'm using the main camera on the back of the iPhone and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, where with the GoPro 10 I'm using the super view and recording at 5.3K at 30 frames per second. And I'm holding the cameras as steady as I can, so I'm not really moving. I'm gonna start moving now, just so you can see how that image stabilization works. When you're moving slowly, we're gonna pan right slowly once again. We're just trying to figure out which device does better if you're just holding it in your hand and you pan a bit left, a bit right, and so on. So yeah, this is how a recording done between these two devices would look like under these conditions. Okay, so after checking out that footage, I'm gonna say the exact same thing that I've said in the comparison between the GoPro 10 and the GoPro 9. If you haven't seen that video, I'm gonna leave a link to that in the video description or the top right corner. So if you are moving nice and slow, the stabilization from the GoPro 10 isn't that great. So for that, the iPhone 12 does better. But as soon as you start running, as soon as you start doing more sudden movements, the stabilization from the GoPro 10 is obviously better than the stabilization that we get from the iPhone 12. But that was to be expected. Alright, next we're gonna move on and check out some sample recordings so we can hear and see which device has the better internal microphone. So let's check out those recordings and I'll come back right after so we can talk about them. We are moving on to a quick microphone test between the GoPro 10 and of course the iPhone 12. So the GoPro 10 I'm recording in 4K at 30 frames per second and the lens set to wide. Where with the iPhone 12 I'm using the main camera and once again recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. It is a bit windy out, so you may hear some wind aside from my voice. I'm basically holding the devices about 2 feet away from me, maybe maybe less than that. So just so you have an idea how the internal microphones on these two devices would sound like if you're recording outdoors. We are moving on to our next audio test. For this audio test, I am inside the car, so you shouldn't hear any other noise aside from my voice. So the iPhone 12, I'm using the ultra-wide lens on the back and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, where the GoPro 10, I'm recording in 4K at 30 frames per second and super view. Of course, they both have image stabilization at these resolutions. So this is how the internal microphones on these two devices would capture sound under these conditions. So a pretty quiet place, I'm gonna say. For our second outdoors audio test between the iPhone 12 and of course the GoPro 10, I am using the front-facing camera on the iPhone 12 and recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. With the GoPro, I haven't changed any settings, so still 4K at 30 frames per second and using the lens at wide. It is a bit windy out today, just as it was 2 minutes ago, so you may hear some wind aside from my voice. So this is how the internal microphone on these two devices would sound like in these conditions. Okay, so for sound recordings, it seems that the GoPro 10 cuts down the wind noise better than the iPhone 12. Whenever it's windy, the sound from the iPhone 12 is far from great. So personally, I feel that the GoPro 10 does better sound-wise when compared to the iPhone 12. Next, we're gonna move on and check out some more sample recordings so we can see how the video quality between these two devices is. Now, of course, we've seen some footage already, but I have 3 or 4 more recordings that I want you to see. So let's check those out and I'll be back so we can talk about them. Okay, so for our next test, we are going to be recording in 4K at 60 frames per second, ultra-wide lens on the iPhone 12 and super view on the GoPro 10. So I'm going to be following her. We're trying to see which device can get the best footage for something like this. So yeah, 4K 60 on the iPhone 12 and the GoPro 10. And we are moving on to another quick recording in 4K at 60 frames per second. With the iPhone 12, I am using the ultra-wide lens on the back, where on the GoPro 10 I have the super view lens. So the maximum field of view available on the GoPro 10. As you can probably see here, it is a lot of shade and also some sun. So some devices do struggle in conditions like this one. So yeah, this is how recording would look like in 4K at 60 frames per second. Moving on to our next recording between the iPhone 12 and the GoPro 10, I am recording in 4K at 60 frames per second. On the iPhone 12, I'm using the ultra-wide lens, and on the GoPro 10, I'm using the super view mode. And I also have the color profile set to natural, so keep that in mind. So I'm gonna walk straight for a bit. I'm also gonna do a bit of running, just so you can see how that 4K at 60 frames per second looks like. We're gonna stop here, we're gonna pan left slowly. Keep going, so basically towards the sun. And we'll walk this way for a bit. And I think I'm gonna turn left somewhere around here. So we'll go in the shade. So yeah, 4K at 60 frames per second, ultra wide lens on the iPhone 12 and super view on the GoPro 10. Alright, so for video quality for daytime videos, it's almost hard to say which one is better. First of all, it almost seems like the videos from the GoPro 10 have a bit more detail. Unless that's just artificial over sharpening, I can't really say, but if you look at roads, if you look at grass, if you look at trees, you can definitely notice more details on the recordings done by the GoPro 10. At the same time, the dynamic range is better in all the recordings done by the iPhone 12. So I can't really say that this one is better or this one is better, because one has some things better, the other one has other things that are better. Which one do you guys like, the GoPro 10 or the iPhone 12 for that video quality? Definitely leave a comment down below and let me know. Alright, next we're gonna move on and check out some sample recordings in low light. And here it's kind of like a bad joke when you're gonna see the recordings from the GoPro 10. So let's check out those recordings and I'll be right back. Alright, we have 4K at 30 frames per second, the main camera on the iPhone 12 and 5.3K at 30 frames per second on the GoPro 10. As you can see for yourself, it got dark. It's not total darkness, but it's definitely darker than it was a few hours back. So we're gonna walk straight, we're gonna turn left, and we're gonna head towards those houses there, just so you can see how the footage looks in darker places. Basically, I can definitely see way more on the screen of the iPhone when compared to the GoPro 10. So we'll go under these trees here because it is darker around there. So yeah, massive difference in the video's brightness in between these trees here. So this is how the footage would look from the GoPro 10 and of course the iPhone 12. Okay, so for low light recordings, well, the GoPro 10 is an absolute joke, I'm gonna say. Those recordings look like they were filmed with a $40 action camera, not an action camera. That's pretty much the most expensive action camera available on the market. So in my opinion, the nighttime recordings from the GoPro 10 are unusable. And of course, the recording from the iPhone 12 look much better. So there you have it, the brand new GoPro 10 and the iPhone 12. What do you guys think? Definitely leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Hopefully this video was useful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.